airway disease. In case of time pugen again we'll rejoin on the same link. Uh, so starting with the case scenario, so this is 25 years old female presented with complaint of shortness of breath for 2 days and cough, which is productive, mucoid for 2 days with history of wheezing, and there is also history of allergy to dust and smoke on this patient. Okay, on examination, the respiratory rate was 35 per minute, which is increased. So normal respiratory rate should be around 16 to 20. Okay, so it should be like that, but it is increased on this patient. And then the pulse is also increased, is 110 per minute. So this patient is tachycardic. So normal pulse should be around 60 to 100. So this patient is tachycardic. And chest auscultation, we can hear the bilateral added sound, that is wheezes on the chest auscultation. On investigation, the complete blood count is normal, while the chest X-ray is showing the hyperinflated lung field. On spirometry, we can see the peak expiratory flow rate of 100 liters per minute, which is reduced. Okay, so with this, the diagnosis we can make with this kind of patient is mainly a bronchial asthma. So this is the presentation how the bronchial asthma presents to you. So then, so starting the today's lecture, so the main objectives of today's lecture is to define what is asthma and know the epidemiology, okay, and to enlist the risk factors of asthma and to describe the mechanism of asthma, okay, and to enumerate the clinical presentation, investigation, complication, and differential diagnosis, and to know the various modes of treatment of asthma. So starting with the definition, so we'll follow the mainly the Jinnah guideline. Okay, so that's the guideline which is mainly for the asthma. So GINA, Jinnah. So you can type that and you can find it in Google. Okay, so there's a Jinnah guideline which is going to be updated every yearly. Okay, so every yearly. So the guidelines which in your book is at least 4 years old. Okay, so now every year the guidelines is been updated. So asthma is a chronic inflammatory disorder of the airways in which the many cells and cellular elements play a role. There is a chronic inflammation which is associated with airway hyperresponsiveness. Okay, so this is the term that you should know: airway hyperresponsiveness. Okay, so responsiveness is there, and that leads to recurrent episodes of wheezing and breathlessness, chest tightness, and coughing, particularly at night or in the early morning. Okay, so this is the typical presentation of the patient with asthma, and these episodes are usually associated with a widespread, but it is a variable airflow obstruction within the lungs that is often reversible. So it is a reversible disease, which is characterized by the airway hyperresponsiveness, which leads into recurrent episodes of wheezing, breathlessness, chest tightness, and coughing, particularly at night or in the early morning, and it is reversible either spontaneously or with treatment. Okay, so this is a reversible disease. So that's the difference between asthma and COPD. So asthma is a reversible disease, and COPD is the next lecture we'll discuss is a COPD, which is a irreversible or partially reversible disease. So that's a differentiated feature. Okay, so coming to the epidemiology, asthma is a problem worldwide with an estimated 300 million affected individuals. So global prevalence of asthma ranges from 1% to 18% of the population in different countries. So WHO has estimated that 15 million disability adjusted life years, DALYs, are lost annually due to asthma, representing 1% of the total global disease burden. So annual worldwide deaths from the asthma have been estimated at 250,000. Okay, the people is dying because of the uncontrolled asthma. So coming to the brainstorming, what are the risk factors for the asthma and what are the experiences? So you must have some risk factors. के होना सक्छ risk factors? Anyone can answer?
Cigarette smoking.
Genetic factors are sir, or environmental factors are.
It can be genetic or environmental. So environmental factors will be there. So coming to that, so mainly dividing into factors influencing the development and the expression of asthma is those factors mainly which is genetic. So example is genes predisposing to atopy. Okay, so is predisposing to any allergy. So there is the genes predisposing to airway hyperresponsiveness might be there. So that might be a possibility in the host factors. And the another one is obesity. So mediators like such as leptins, which is mainly present in the obese patient person, may affect the airway function and increase the likelihood of asthma development. Okay, so that's mainly a possibility. And another is a sexual predisposition. By adulthood, the prevalence of the asthma is greater in the women than in the men, while in the childhood it is reversed. So it might be because of the hormonal factors which is coming up in the women as the age progresses. So that might be a possibility which has more predilection for the asthmatic attacks. So coming to the another environmental factors like allergens indoors, like domestic mice. So there is a lot of now we are putting dogs, cats, for animals as our pets. Okay, so that might be a possibility. And the another is mice also. And also you have to ask about the cockroach allergen, how much cockroach was there in the house. Okay, and the fungi, molds and yeast, like this in the rainy season it is mainly prevalent. Okay, so fungi, molds and yeast. And the outdoor with the pollens and fungi, molds and yeast is another one. And then the infection is a predominantly is a viral. So viral infection has a more prediction for the acute asthmatic attacks. Okay, so any virus leading to rhinovirus, to adenovirus, to influenza, parainfluenza. Okay, and then also we have to look for now the COVID. Then the occupational sensitizers. So any sensitizers occupational uses like the painting and all the sprays that they use in the motor garage, denting, painting, and all these things are the occupational sensitizers, or even in the any chemical factories. Then the tobacco smoke is mainly either it might be a passive smoke or active smoking, outdoor smoke, indoor air pollution. All these are there, and the certain diets. Okay, like this is just like peanuts, and someone is mainly allergic to eggs and shrimps. All these things to be taken in the history to consider the asthmatic attack. Then coming to the mechanism of asthma, so I'm not going to so much detail on the mechanism of asthma as you have already been taught in pathology classes. There are certain inflammatory cells which is play in the asthmatic airways. So one is the mast cells. So it is activated mucosal mast cells release bronchoconstrictor mediators like histamine, citrulline leukotrienes, and prostaglandin D2. And these cells are activated by the allergens through the high affinity Ig receptors. Okay, so the Ig receptors will be there, and as well as by the osmotic stimuli according for the exercise induced bronchoconstriction. So increased mast cell numbers in the airway response cell may be linked to the airway hypertension. So this is about the mast cell. And the another cell which is mainly responsive playing the part is eosinophils. So it is present in the increased numbers in the airways. So release basic proteins that may damage airway epithelial cells, and they may also have a role in the release of the growth factors and the airway remodeling. And the another one is a T lymphocytes. So now, so all these are the mediators which has been produced by these and present in increased numbers in the airways, release specific cytokines. So always the cytokine now the all things related to the cytokine storm. Okay, so interleukin 4, interleukin 5, interleukin 9, and interleukin 13. That also eosinophilic inflammation and Ig production by the B lymphocytes. So always in the asthmatic attack or any patient presented with wheezing and asthmatic symptoms, always we look for the absolute eosinophil count and the serum Ig levels. Okay, so if the Ig levels is increased, then the eosinophil increased, then the diagnosis is more towards the this allergic component related to extrinsic asthma. Then the increase in TS2 cell activity may due to in the part of the reduction in the regulatory T cells that normally inhibit T helper 2 cells. Okay, so these are the mainly responsible. And the another are the dendritic cells. There is a sample allergens from the airway surface and the and migrate to the regional lymph nodes where they interact with the regulatory T cells and ultimately stimulate the production of T helper 2 cells from NAP T cells. And the another is macrophages, increases in number in the airways and may be activated by allergens through low affinity Ig receptor to release inflammatory mediators and cytokines that amplify the inflammatory process. Then another is neutrophil. The numbers are increased in the airways at the sputum of the patient with a severe asthma and in smoking asthmatics, but the pathophysiological role of these cells is uncertain, and there is an increase may even due to steroid therapy. So steroid therapy can falsely increase the neutrophil cells level in the blood also. So this is the inflammatory and cytokine network. So this dendritic cell, then the antigen presentation, T helper cells, interleukin 1, macrophages, all these are the chemical mediators which are playing the part. So airway structure cells involved in the pathogenesis of asthma are airway epithelial cells, airway smooth muscle cells, and endothelial cells, and also the fibroblast and myofibroblasts are taking part, and the airway nerves are the structural cells involved in the pathogenesis of asthma. So this is the cellular sources of inflammatory mediators and their physiological effects, what is going to happen. So if the mast cells, macrophages, all these cells are going to produce the chemical mediators. So histamines, leukotrienes, these PAF and bradykinin, tachykinins, and anaphylatoxin, endotoxin, endothelins, nitric oxide, cytokines, all these. So what is their effect? So their effect is mainly leading into bronchoconstriction and the plasma exudation. So there will be a mucus hypersecretion and airway responsiveness, that is AHR, and then the structural changes like fibrosis, smooth muscle cell hyperplasia, angiogenesis, and mucus hyperplasia is the effect. And with this all that we are getting the symptom of the patient. So what is happening in the pathological changes? So this is the normal airways. Okay, so normal airways. So in the asthmatic airways, there is always a airway narrows because of the excess mucus secretion of mucus from the gland increases, and there is a swollen submucosa leading into a constriction of the airways and leading into a symptom. So this is the mainly pathophysiology. So airway narrowing in the asthma is mainly airway smooth muscle is contraction in response to the multiple bronchoconstriction and mediators. And then the another is the airway edema is due to increased microvascular leakage in the response to the inflammatory mediators. And there will be a airway thickening due to structural changes, often termed as remodeling, and may be important in more severe disease and is not fully reversible by current therapy. So that's why we have to treat asthma early, and we have to prevent it to go into airway thickening by the use of the steroids. So that is mainly the role of the steroids in the asthmatic attacks, okay, and the prevent as a controller medication to decrease the chance of having a remodeling. So then the mucus hypersecretion is may lead to the luminal occlusion, so the mucus plugging, and is product of the increased mucus secretion and the inflammatory exudates. Okay, so there's a mucus hypersecretion. Then the mechanism of airway hyperresponsiveness is the excessive contraction of the airway smooth muscle cells, which may result from the increased volume or contractility of airway smooth muscle cells. Then the uncoupling of the airways is the contraction as a result of the inflammatory changes in the airway wall may lead to excessive narrowing of the airways, which leads into loss of maximum plateau of contraction found in normal airways when bronchoconstrictor substance are inhaled. Okay, so and then there is a thickening of the airway wall by the edema, and the structural changes amplifies the airway narrowing due to the contraction of the airway muscle cell for geometric reasons. And then the sensory nerves may be sensitized by the inflammation, leading to exaggerated bronchoconstriction in response to the sensory stimuli. So these are the main mechanism. So one is a excessive contraction of the airway muscle, another is uncoupling, and there's a thickening of the airway wall, and there's the sensory nerves which might be sensitized, leading into airway hyperresponsiveness. Okay. So then coming to the what are the clinical symptoms of the asthmatic patient? So what are the experiences that you have gone through? So the clinical diagnosis, the medical history, the patient can have a symptoms of episodic breathlessness. So this is the point that has to be considered. Okay, so episodic, so it is not a continuous or progressive breathlessness. There is a episodic attack of breathlessness in the case of asthma, and there will be a wheezing, and there will be a cough, and the patient can present with chest tightness. So these are the classical symptoms the patient will have. So there is the episodic symptoms after an incidental allergen exposure. Okay, and then it is a seasonal variability of the symptoms. So either the season, either in it is a rainy season, winter season. Okay, and the season during Baisakh and Chait, where there is a lot of winds. Okay, pollens will be there. During that season, the asthmatic attacks will be more. Okay, and a positive family history of asthma and atopic disease is there. So then, if with these symptoms the patient will be presenting, so then you can consider you are dealing with an asthmatic patient. So the condition to consider in the diagnostic of asthma is that has the patient had an attack or recurrent attacks of the wheezing is there? Does the patient have a troublesome cough at night? Does the patient wheeze or cough after exercise? So this is mainly common for the exercise-induced asthma. And then does the patient experience wheezing, chest tightness, or cough after exposure to the airborne allergens or pollutants? Okay, so is there any history of exposure to any allergens or pollutants? Do the patient colds go to the chest or take more than 10 days to clear up? Okay, so the patient will tell कि डाक्टर साहब मेरो त के पहिला खोकी लागिरहेको थियो, अब अहिले त्यो छातीमै घा जस्तो छ र मलाई आज 10-15 दिन भइसक्यो, यो छाती क्लियर हुने गाह्रो हुन्छ भने then we can consider that. Okay, and are symptoms improved by the appropriate asthma treatment? Right? So asthma treatment just like bronchodilator, bronchodilator like short-acting bronchodilator like salbutamol. So if it is improved with that, then we can consider that you are dealing with the asthma. So on the physical examination, so what you are going to find, the cyanosis is very a late feature. It is not a first feature that you can get the cyanosis in case of asthma. Okay, so when the patient goes into respiratory failure and the respiratory fatigue, then only the patient will develop cyanosis, and the patient can have a tachycardia. So there will increased pulse rate just like in our patient, increased respiratory rate, that is tachypnea, just like in our patient. There might be a hyperinflated lungs that if you percuss, so there is a features of hyperinflation. Okay, so the resonancy will increase, and then the intercostal recession because of the use of accessory muscles, and then the wheezing. Okay, so wheezing can be audible on the auscultation. So these are the clinical signs that you can acquire in case of asthma. Then coming to the for the diagnosis, for the proving the diagnosis, so then we have to investigate. So what are the investigation of the choice? The foremost diagnostic criteria is the lung function test. So spirometry confirms the airflow limitation. So there will be a airflow limitation with reduced forced expected by volume in first second, and FE1 by FEC ratio is going to decrease, and then the peak expected flow rate is going to increase. So this is the peak flow meter that you can use as the office, or you can use in the home also. Okay, so there is a calibration out here. So ask the patient to exhale through this mouthpiece, and you see the range of this movement of this marker. Okay, so if marker, and then you can correlate with for what age and for what weight. So that is and what population. Okay, so whether it's Asian or Hispanics, that's all you can calculate that, and then you can find the actual PFR for that patient. Okay, so and then you can monitor that daily, in the morning also, in the evening also, and you can also adjust the treatment according to this PFR. Okay, so this is the peak flow meter that you can use. And then the another is the spirometry. The spirometry is the you can use the lab spirometry. Okay, so the PFT lab that you can say the pulmonary function lab, you can send for the spirometry. And then what you have to look for is the reversibility, which is demonstrated by the more than 12%. So there will be a more than 12% or 200 ml increase in FEV1 after 15 minutes of inhaled short-acting beta-2 agonist like salbutamol, or in some patient by a 2 to 4 week trial of the oral glucocorticoids. But mainly we are using this inhaled short-acting beta-2 agonist. Okay, so after first we will take the this FE1 FEC without giving the bronchodilator, and after giving the bronchodilator after 15 minutes, we will again repeat the spirometry, and if the FE1 is increased by more than 12%, or if there is an increase in FE1 of 200 ml increase, then we can say that the reversibility is there. So that's mainly gives us diagnosis of asthma with that other symptoms which is we have discussed earlier. Then the measurement of PFR is twice daily may confirm the diurnal variation in the airflow obstruction. Okay, so that's mainly we can use for this is the peak flow meter, where you can use the PFR. Then another test that you can use is the airway hyperresponsiveness. For that, you can use the methacholine test or histamine challenge test when the your pulmonary function and spirometry is normal. Okay, so still you are thinking this might be a case of asthma. For airway hyperresponsiveness, you can use the methacholine or histamine challenge test. It is rarely useful in clinical practice, but can be used in the differential diagnosis of a chronic cough and when the diagnosis is in doubt in the setting of normal pulmonary function test. So exercise testing is done to demonstrate the post-exercise bronchoconstriction if there is a predominant history of exercise-induced asthma. Okay, so you can do that. So with this, so this is the just like in severe HR, so it is going to increase, decrease, and moderate AHR. So all these are going to decrease histamine after giving the histamine and methacholine. Okay, so there is a bronchoconstriction that you can look on that. So it is very risky procedure. So patient can go into severe spasm or severe asthmatic attack. So that might require the admission. Okay, so it should be done very vigilantly. So now the another ancillary test that you can use is a hematological test. In hematological test, you can do the serum Ig. The serum Ig level can be increased. Specific Ig to inhale allergens that can be used, like aspergillus or any allergens that you can use. Maybe measure in some patient. Complete blood count shows eosinophilia in cases of allergic manifestation. There can be a leukocytosis if secondary infection or patient in the prolonged systemic corticosteroid therapy. Then the imaging, the chest X-ray usually normal, but in severe cases may show hyperinflation or the pneumothorax in the acute exacerbation. Okay, so there might be a hyperinflation or the complication. There can be a pneumothorax because of the rupture of the bleb. Okay, because of the hyperinflation, and then the in CT scan chest is only advisable to rule out the other causes like allergic bronchopleural aspergillosis. Okay, so in which there will be a central bronchiectasis and along with the asthmatic symptoms, then there will be also eosinophilia and there is an increased serum Ig levels. Okay, so this is mainly because of the sensitization to the aspergillus. Okay, so aspergillus. So in this we can ask for the specific Ig for aspergillus. Okay, so this is the ABPA. So if your asthma is not been controlled, so there is a repeated attack, the patient is coming up, so then we should consider whether it is ABPA or not. So in that, if your serum Ig level is high, your eosinophil count is more than 1,000, your absolute eosinophil count, and there is a central bronchiectasis, then we can make the diagnosis of ABPA. Okay, so ABPA. So then the another is the skin test that you can use is the skin prick test to common inhalant allergens are positive in the allergic asthma, whereas it's negative in case of intrinsic asthma. Okay, so intrinsic asthma is mainly because of the genetic factor. So extrinsic asthma is mainly because of the allergens. Okay, so allergens. So is positive in case of extrinsic asthma, and positive skin response may be helpful in proceeding the patient to undertake allergen avoidance measure that you can use. So coming to the differential diagnosis, there's a lot of list of differential diagnosis in case of asthma. So it can be because of the upper airway disorders like vocal cord paralysis, foreign body aspiration, laryngotracheal masses, or tracheal narrowing, tracheomalacia, angioedema, lower airway disease like COPD patient, bronchiectasis, ABPA, eosinophilic pneumonias, and bronchiolitis obliterans. So this is the mainly ILD. So we'll discuss this in the ILD lecture. Okay, so bronchiolitis obliterans, and then the another is systematic vasculitis, Chog-Strauss. Okay, so Chog-Strauss similarly present as a asthma, like asthmatic attacks, and there will be an increased ESR, but there will be a history of arthralgia, and then the skin rashes will be there. So then if that is present, then we can also think about the Chog-Strauss syndrome in case of the asthma not being controlled. Okay, so in that case you require steroid, oral steroid along with the immunosuppressive agents like cyclophosphamide and all these things. Then in the psychiatric causes like the conversion disorders, emotional laryngeal wheezing, Monhausen syndrome, or malingering. Okay, so these are the other to complete the list of the differential diagnosis. So now coming to the complications. So what are the complications? So because of the excessive respiratory work or overload, the patient can go into exhaustion. So there might be a dehydration. So there is a high chance of airway infection, and because of the lot of cough and all these things, patient can have a toxic syncopal attack, and there's a pneumothorax. Okay, so patient can have a high chance of having pneumothorax, and then patient can go into acute hypercapnic or hypoxic respiratory failure. Okay, so there's a type 1 or type 2 respiratory failure the patient can have. If there's a type 1, then only a patient will have a hypoxia, whereas in the type 2, the CO2 is going to increase. Okay, so this is the complication of the asthma. So coming to the management. So management, so we'll, as already I told, we will follow the GINA guideline. Okay, so GINA guideline for National Asthma Education and Prevention Program in conjunction with the Global Initiative for Asthma, that is GINA. Okay, so that we are going to follow. So what is the aims of the asthma therapy? So is mainly we have to minimal, or ideally there is no chronic symptoms, and including nocturnal symptoms should not be there. So minimal or infrequent exacerbations, no emergency visits, and then the minimal, ideally, or no use of as required SOS beta 2 agonist, no limitation and activities including exercise, and peak expiratory flow rate circadian variation should be less than 20% or near normal during morning and evening. Okay, so that's mainly a consideration that we have to do, and the minimal or no adverse effects of the medicine. So this is the aims of the asthma therapy. So what is the components of the chronic asthma diagnosis and management? So patient education designed to foster a partnership of care, reduces the urgent care visits, improve perceived control of asthma, and self-management education is the mainly the important thing. Okay, self-management. So I'll come on the coming slide. What is self-management education? And control of environmental factors. So this is very important. Okay, so only the medication is not going to help. So you have to control the environment. Okay, so environmental factors and comorbid conditions. Significant reduction in exposure to non-specific airway irritants or inhaled irritants should be considered. Okay, so if the patient is using, what is the allergy source? If there is a carpet in the room, whether there is a pet in the house, okay, so that might be allergic to that. If the patient is using all the sprays and perfumes, which might be on dyes, okay, hair dyes, all these causes the source of irritants. Okay, so irritants. So that should be considered, and that should be find out, and that should be addressed. And then comorbid conditions like rhinosinusitis. Okay, so in the rhinosinusitis, if there is a sinus, always there is a chance of having a postnasal drip. Okay, if you are not controlling that, so your asthma is not going to be controlled. And GERD. Okay, so reflux also has to be controlled. And obesity, the weight reduction always should be advised. And the obstetric sleep apnea is the another one. Okay, so that has to be addressed. Okay, so if there's any snoring like symptoms, daytime sleepiness is there, or apneic episode is there or not, and you have to diagnose the obstetric sleep apnea, that might have aggravated the asthma. Then components of continuing the components, the assessing and monitoring the asthma severity and asthma control is the another one. Guidelines emphasize the control over classification of the severity. Okay, so always you should always follow up the patient and always assess. Okay, so assess the patient. So that might require extensive group of treatment, or you can taper it down. Okay, so taper it down. So it measures the severity of the initial presentation is helpful in guiding the treatment and the pharmacology agents for the asthma that we have to consider. So what are the treatments? So we can divide into a supportive therapy and the drug therapy, that can be divided into reliever medication and the controller, that is preventer medication, that you should might have known from your pharmacological classes. So type of the drug therapy is mainly a bronchodilators, which are mainly a relievers, while the controllers are the mainly preventers, which is inhibiting the underlying inflammatory process, that is mainly a steroids. Okay, so that's mainly a preventers. Then the route and the modes of the drug delivery can be oral, inhaler, rotahaler, nebulizer, special Gerostat injectable. So there are also evohaler, and all these things has been and turbohaler has been added. Okay, so there is a lot of the mode of drug therapy. So in our setting, that is mainly available are these. So inhaler, dry powder inhaler. So this is rotahaler, and then the meter dose inhaler, and also you can find the nebulizer, and you can have a spacer and Gerostat spacer, that if the patient is not synchronizing with this meter dose inhaler. Okay, so you don't have to synchronize. So once you can push it down, then the drug will be delivered here, and the patient can take deep inspiration and then take the drug. Okay, so if you are only using that, you have to synchronize with the respiratory procedure. Okay, and then what are the bronchodilator therapies? So it is beta 2 adrenergic agonists, anticholinergic, and theophylline. It acts primarily on the airway, smooth muscle cell, or reverse the bronchoconstriction of asthma. There will be a rapid relief of symptoms, but has a little or no effect on the underlying inflammatory process. Is there. And then what is the effect of beta 2 agonists? Causes the relaxation of airway smooth muscle cell. There is a inhibition of mast cell mediated release, also inhibition of plasma exudation and airway edema, increases the mucocellular clearance, increases the mucus secretion, decrease cough, and there's no effect on the chronic inflammation. So it's only having a bronchodilatory effect. So what are the types of beta-2 agonists? So there is mainly a short-acting salbutamol, albuterol, and torbutalin. Long-acting, which is available, is salmeterol and formoterol in our setting till now. So there are a lot of other list of long-acting like indacaterol, vilanditrol, and all these things are not available out here. So we are using mainly a salmeterol and formoterol as a twice daily. Here. And then the side effects of beta-2 agonist is adverse effects are usually a problem with the beta-2 agonist when given by inhalation. So always you have to consider whether patient develop muscle tremor or not, palpitation is there or not. And if you are giving a nebulizer in the hospital setting, always look for the potassium. Okay, so there is a high chance of hypokalemia due to increased uptake of skeletal muscle cells, but the effect does not usually cause a clinical problem. Okay, so by hypokalemia we have to always be cautious about if you are doing a frequent nebulization. Then the anticholinergics like ipatropine bromide, which is short-acting, is a Ipravent, and tritropine bromide is a, okay, you can use as a Taiva. Okay, so this is the long-acting, and the another long-acting which is the glycopyrrolium, which is available. Okay, so and then the prevent cholinergic nerve-induced bronchoconstriction and mucous hypertension used as an additional bronchodilator. High dose may be given by the nebulizer in treating the acute severe asthma. This is most common side effect is a dry mouth. In elderly patient, urinary retention and glaucoma may be observed in the patient with receiving the anticholinergics. Theophylline, prescribed as an oral bronchodilator several years ago, especially as it was inexpensive. So bronchodilatory effect is due to inhibition of the phosphodiesterase in the airway smooth muscle cells, which increase the cyclic AMP. Doses required for a bronchodilation commonly cause side effects that are mediated mainly by phosphodiesterase inhibition is there. And then the clinical use is mainly you can give as a slow release preparation once or twice daily as for the stable plasma concentration than normal. Intravenous aminophylline is used mainly for the severe asthma. And aminophylline is occasionally used in the patient with severe exacerbation that are refractory to high dose SABAs. Okay, so you can use that. So then coming to the inhaled glucocorticoids, the mechanism of action is effective as an anti-inflammatory medication. It helps to reduce the asthma symptoms, improve the quality of life, improve the lung function. So it has a action on decreasing the airway hyperresponsiveness and controlling the airway inflammation. And it has another important action is the reducing the frequency and the severity of exacerbation. So for the control, so for this function, so that's why the inhaled corticosteroid is the first line treatment for the asthma. And then the reducing the asthma mortality. So what is the low dose, medium dose, and high dose adults and adolescent dose of inhaled corticosteroids? So you can first start with a low dose ICS. So these are the ICS which has been available. So beclomethasone is available out here. Okay, and then the budesonide is available. Cyclosporine is not available. Fluticasone furoate can be used, and mometasone furoate and mometasone is also available. So mometasone, fluticasone, and beclomethasone is available. So you start with a low dose if the patient is not improving or patient has is not controlled. So what is controlled and uncontrolled, I will come on the consequences coming slides. Okay, and then you can jump into medium, and then you can go for the maximum high dose of the inhaled corticosteroids. Then what are the side effects of the inhaled steroids? Is the local adverse effects from the inhaled steroids include oropharyngeal candidiasis. So patient can present with dysphonia and occasionally coughing from the upper airway irritation. So for this prevention of this, always advise the patient to have a rinse with hot water after taking the drug. Okay, the mouth after taking the drug to prevent the oropharyngeal candidiasis. And systemic side effects of the long term with the high doses of inhaled glucose can be usually bruising, adrenal suppression, and decreased bone marrow mineral density. Then coming to the leukotriene modifiers, so like anti-leukotrienes such as montelukast and jafelukast blocks cyclin receptors, LT1 receptors, and provide modest clinical benefit in asthma, usually in an adjuvant therapy in some patient not controlled with a low dose inhaled corticosteroids and given orally once or twice daily you can use. And the chromones, the sodium chromoglycate and the neurochromyl sodium are asthma controller drugs that appear to inhibit mast cell and sensory nerve activation and is effective in blocking the trigger-induced asthma such as exercise-induced asthma and allergy and sulfur dioxide-induced asthma. So exercise-induced asthma is there, then there may be a role of chromosomal sodium glycate. Okay, so this is mainly the indication. And the another now the era of monoclonal antibody. So then the anti-IgE antibody like omalizumab is a blocking antibody that neutralizes circulating IgE without blinding a cell-bound IgE, inhibits IgE-mediated reactions given as a subcutaneous injection and every 2 to 4 weeks, and appears not to have a significant side effects. So these are the all the drugs which are used now. So there are other monoclonal antibodies has been added on like reslizumab and all these things. So I will come on the coming slides. What are their action? Okay. So others are the immunotherapy and alternative therapies that you can use as a yoga and acupuncture and chiropractic that can be used as an alternative therapy. So time sucking lashes, so we can rejoin, right? So if we discontinue. So then another thing that after all this knowing that we should know about the what is the level of control. Okay, so level of control to escalate or de-escalate the treatment. So how to assess the asthma control? Okay, so asthma control. So this is the good chart which is also given your division. So this is the control, partially control and uncontrolled. So with this we look for the 5 symptoms. Okay, so 5 symptoms, that is daytime symptoms, limitation of activities, nocturnal symptoms, awaking and need of rescue or reliever treatment, whether there is a lung function or lung function. These are the 5 things that we are going to look on. So if it is twice or less per week, there's no limitation of activities, there is no nocturnal symptoms, and there's twice or less per week need of the beta 2 agonist like salbutamol or normal, then we can see this asthma is controlled. Okay, so, and you can remain on the same treatment, on the same line. Okay, and what is partially controlled? Any present in any week. So like more than twice per week, limitation of activities is any, and then the nocturnal symptoms can be there, need for the rescue more than twice per week, and less than 80% of the predicted is there of the lung function, that is PFR of the personal best. And uncontrolled, 3 or more features of partly or uncontrolled partially controlled asthma present in any week. So this is the mainly thing.